It's after show time. It's where we just hang out and answer whatever questions, and I can take a sip of coffee to get those pieces. Notifications for the next Network Plus study group. If you keep watching the calendar, I give you an opportunity to register, where you can send me a question, and then you go in a list where you get an email notification of the next study group. And if you watch my Twitter, you watch Facebook, you watch Google Plus, I also send out notifications generally a day before, and sometimes or always just before we start. Sometimes those are hard to catch before we start. Let's go to phones because we're here and it's the after show. 937 area code. Are you there, caller?
Yes, I am.
Yes, you are. Hi, what's your name?
My name's Garrett Schumacher.
Hello, Garrett. How are you? What type of questions do you have for us today?
I just had a quick question on where are we going to make the full convergence from IP version 4 to IP version 6?
Oh, what? We haven't done that already? That hasn't happened? That hasn't even come close. This is a very common question for the study group, in fact. And I'll give you my perspective because I'm an old guy, I guess relatively speaking, in this industry. Back before Windows was out, when we were still doing everything at a DOS prompt, I really cut my teeth with networking using a product from a company that used to be called Network General. Network General ultimately acquired and divested and acquired again by other companies. They're now part of NetScout. But they make a product that we now call generically, we use this term, they made a product called the sniffer. Now we just call that sniffing a generic term to use for gathering packets, but it's actually a real product with a trademark. You can't even use that term when you write it down anywhere because that's a product name. And the sniffer grabbed all the packets from the network and it showed you what was going on. And back in those days, that was interesting to see. You could really get a perspective of what was happening on the network because there was no Wireshark. There was no third-party application to do this. Protocol decodes were very complex. There wasn't a lot of free software to pull from to do that. And back then, we're talking 1990 timeframe, 94, I think, 95 timeframe for IPv6. The sniffer supported the decoding of IPv6 traffic. Before there was really Windows, before Windows 3.1, there were earlier versions of Windows that weren't really networked, Windows 2.1 and earlier. But Windows 3.0, when it came out, was really the big push for Windows. We were doing IPv6 before that. I say we, nobody really was. I think the government was. NASA may have been doing it. There weren't a lot of people using it, but that's why it was added to that particular product. The standard has been around forever, it seems, in a networking term. And back to your question, though, okay, so it's been around so long. What in the world is taking so long for everybody to embrace this? And it's probably a combination of things. I get to go into a lot of data centers. I get to see a lot of people's networks every day. I get to talk to a lot of different people, and I'm talking to them about the infrastructure of their environments and what they're doing. Very, very, very few people are doing IPv6. And when you ask them, hey, are you planning to do some IPv6? They kind of scrunch their nose up and go, I don't want to do IPv6. There's too many letters and numbers in IPv6, and it's another level of complexity. It is more complex than IPv4, not just in the size of the addresses, but a lot of the background things that IPv6 can do. There's a lot more local communication, and the local communication is different than communication that goes outside of your subnet. There's now of course, your infrastructure devices have to be able to understand IPv6. There's usually conversions you have to do now between IPv4 and IPv6, tunnel it differently. Are you going to do NAT? Are you not going to NAT? How's your firewall going to operate with this? How are your applications going to work properly over IPv6? So there's this slew of questions. The people that are putting it in right now are the service providers. If you wanted to connect up to a network, a Time Warner, a Comcast, an AT&T, a Sprint, those Verizon networks, those are IPv6 in the core. They are running IPv6 today, and some of their customers are connecting via IPv6. But because we have really limited the type of impact that we have because of NAT, and nobody has really hit the point where I can't get an internet IP address, even though they have really all been handed out People are still have their lists of them they can hand out to other people. Because we've kind of hit that point, nobody's really pushing. There's no big need for IPv6. If I couldn't get my Gmail, I'd be on the IPv6 bandwagon today. I'd be connecting the world via IPv6, but I can do Gmail just fine. I can stream video from my studio. I can connect up and check my YouTube. I can do all the things I normally need to do with IPv4. I think when we finally get to a point where we have to make some hard decisions about changing infrastructure, we will. But in the meantime, companies are still thinking about it. They're still buying equipment that is IPv6 ready. It's got the code inside of it. It's got the protocols inside of it. Improvements are still being made in the technology for IPv6 because it's such a broad set of things you need to know. OSPF version 3 is the IPv6 version of OSPF. Wow, I got to now know OSPF plus a little bit more. And it's complex, so it has to have code written into the routers that does it. It's this circle that I'm not going to do it until I need to, and I don't need to until I have to do it. So we're kind of sitting on that. So I wish I had an answer to your question. I don't have one. When are we going to make the conversion? I have no earthly idea. I don't see a lot of traction right now. Maybe that will change, but as of the moment, nobody's really pushing and pushing and pushing for it.
Oh, okay. It's been out for a while, so I just thought it might be happening sometime in the near future.
You would think. When are we going to see it? It's not happening. Everybody's trying it out every year. I wish I could find this website real quick. There's a test that's done every year for IPv6, and it's this World IPv6 Day, and that was in 2011. Do they do IPv6? They had an IPv6 launch day in 2012. They were doing these things every year that had people doing this, that they would do IPv6. They would connect up their routers and their firewalls and the things that they were using every year. And they tried out. They connect everything up. They go, does it work? Yep. It worked. And so they would be able to connect to Facebook and Google and YouTube, and they were able to see, yes, this actually did work. And then the day would be over and everybody go back to what they were doing. So that's kind of where we are. Unfortunately, everybody's back to what they were doing. Nobody's really implementing it on a wide scale. So it's one of those things where we'll just all stay tuned and see what happens.
Okay. That just led to my other question. I mean, I'm probably jumping the gun here, but
sure.
Assuming we do implement to make the full transition to IP version 6, does that do away with the concept of having private IP addressing, since there's so many addresses in IP version 6?
Yeah,
I still think it would be a good idea to have private IP addresses, but since there's so many IP addresses to begin with in IP version 6, will we need private IP addressing?
There's so many IPv6 addresses that the idea of a private address in the same way we use IPv4 private addresses really isn't necessary. We created these private non-routable addresses, the 10. network, the 192.168 network, the 172.16, et cetera, because we needed some way to have our own private addresses in here that everybody could use these addresses and we could minimize the impact of using up all those IPv4. But with IPv6, every single device in the world and then some can have their own address independently, and we don't have to have anything private. But that also, there were some nice things about private IP addressing that were useful. Non-routable addresses, there was security aspects to this that were nice. There were some management functions about this that were useful. And I don't necessarily see companies doing that. There may be natting they continue to do with IPv6. So they have their own addresses internally, but only announce one address out to the world. They could still do that piece. I don't see that the same need for private is there. In fact, IPv6 has a concept of link local addresses that it uses inside the network and a completely separate set of addresses it uses when it goes outside of the local network, sort of like the API-PA addressing. I know that's not not private addressing, but it's sort of an automated internal on the same subnet address. So some of the ideas will certainly flow over between IPv4 and IPv6, and there's just no need for truly private addresses anymore. What you're probably going to see instead is companies will get these enormous block of IP addresses, and that will be their private addresses that they can then decide, I'm going to route this address or I'm not going to route this address over the internet. And this chat room's right, there's enormous security ideas and thoughts around this. Do we NAT? Do we not NAT? NAT is not security. It's just a translation. The firewall is the security. So if we get away from having to NAT to a private address, is it still as secure? And we as security professionals and networking professionals have to wrap our head around this new idea of doing it differently and try to figure out what's going to make sense. So there's no need for private addresses anymore, but there's certainly some nice organizational concepts that brought to the table that we could still use. It just won't be private addressing in the IPv6 strict sense anyway.
Okay. Yes, and I plan on taking my exam next week on Wednesday, so hopefully I'm ready for this.
I bet if you you take your exam, good luck on your Network Plus. I bet if you walk into an organization and they are asking about, in an interview, what do you know about IPv6? Because these are the kind of questions I'll ask people on interviews, because I do technical interviews too. And I'll say, tell me everything you know about ARP. And you have to answer everything you know about ARP. I'm not asking you to troubleshoot. I'm not asking you about how this works. Just tell me what you know about it. Tell me everything you know about IPv6. And it's nice to be able to have that information, because you'll occasionally walk into an environment where there's a big project about to take place. Tell me everything you know about voice over IP. And in fact, the question you might ask is, are you doing a lot of voice over IP? Well, we are. We're starting a new project. Well, let me tell you what I know about it. Let me tell you what I've done with it. IPv6 is another one of those technologies that you might run into on an interview that I think are good to know, so that people know you're up to date with the latest technology. But I think most people they don't have any big projects going on unless you're working for a service provider. If you're interviewing for a service provider, that'd be a good thing to know.
I see.
Well, thanks, Garrett. Appreciate the call. Thanks for the question. And good luck with your exam.
Yes, it'll be my first time taking it, so hopefully I'll pass first try. So
let us know how it goes.
Will do.
That's great. The next step, of course, when you're taking that exam is going through and just getting into the room. That's the biggest nervous part for me, is just getting there. And I mentioned it takes me 10 minutes just to be able to really watch what's going on and be able to answer those things in that piece. Really a challenge. Yeah, no, the broadcast domain idea, there's not really broadcast. There's some ideas and thoughts around broadcast, but it's not the same in IPv6, is it? Very, very different. And IPv6 operates. Broadcasts are a pain, so let's not do broadcasts anymore. My voice is holding out. I should probably grab some spray here for the voice and make sure we can keep going with this while I pick up the line of, this is probably a non-real number because it comes across on here as all ones, but the person who's on the phone will hear a little beeping noise as I pick up on the line. And are you there, caller?
Hello.
Hello, how are you? I can hear you. What's your name?
It's N.A. Graham.
Hey, how are you? Yes, hello, welcome. From the chat rooms,
good.
From the conversations we often have, from the emails.
I'm working on my Security Plus study now,
Very
and
good.
I scheduled the exam for 1 month from today. Hopefully I'm prepared for it.
Excellent.
It's a lot of different things. I'm very curious as to what they're going to have for performance based on Security Plus exam. Probably will have to configure something or other, but anyway.
No doubt.
My question is about this. I'm building a new desktop as we speak.
Okay.
And I've done it because I've had to move on from Vista to Windows 7. I'm curious, what do you recommend as a good site for honest comparison of antivirus and malware software? I run and I see things. You Google stuff and you see links, but you never know whether they're going for their own, promotional purposes or whether it's an honest, true evaluation.
Correct.
I'm very leery about some of the modern things that tend to do false positives and stuff like that. and you know, it concerns me. Where would you go for a really, really good comparison of anti-malware and anti-software virus products? And what are you using yourself?
It is so hard to find a truly independent and well-maintained site that can give you some very straightforward antivirus and security feedback. There's probably a lot of reasons around that. Part of the problem right now is that the threats are changing to some degree. Antivirus is still incredibly important. The problem is that there's so much virus that's going on. They're changing so fast that antivirus software and the way that it operates is becoming it's harder and harder for this software to find the bad things that are coming in. So let's talk about that really quick, because this is I in previous employment worked for a very large antivirus company that if you said the name, you would recognize it. But so I got a little bit of a background on antivirus and the way that it operates. And it's effectively most antivirus, the bulk of antivirus is based on signatures. It's based on knowing an actual malicious code that is coming in and matching it to what is being transmitted through your network onto your computer and then being run in memory on your device. So it has to match. The antivirus has to know about it to be able to stop it. But the problem is so much antivirus is now coming through, and it's being rebuilt every time people download it. There's a type of creation of executable files that every time you click download, it creates a new executable and downloads that. The next person who clicks on that link will get a completely different executable. And so it becomes more of a challenge for the antivirus companies to build a signature that's going to match both of those and be able to truly stop that when it's coming in. Plus, there's a delay. By the time a 0-day malware virus is out, the antivirus company has to get a copy of that. They have to examine it. They have to run it through whatever systems they have to create the signature. The signature has to be tested so that the signature doesn't break anything else. And then the signature has to be downloaded to you, either in a push method or you have to query every day or every hour to be able to get the latest version of that. Well, during that time frame, of course, things sneak in. So antivirus companies are starting to change their approach. They know that the software is going to change things on your computer. Maybe instead of watching for something that is you have to match a signature for, maybe we should just check to see if the virus itself is trying to manipulate things that we know malware manipulates. And so you'll see things pop up on antivirus software these days that is looking for certain events to occur. Even if it doesn't recognize the signature, it sees the event occur as it's coming in and it's able to stop those when those occur. So they're really starting to approach this in different ways because you just can't keep up with the polymorphic nature of the way that these viruses are being created and pushed down to you in email and created in links. And as we've even seen, most recently, the malware can be inside of an RTF file. This is this past week. It's inside of an RTF file, a Word document that is sent to you.
I saw that.
And if you just preview it in Outlook, it infects your machine. You didn't even click on it. We tell you, don't click on attachments. And you don't even click on an attachment, it infects you. So this becomes
That's one of the reasons why I don't use Microsoft Outlook. I have old Forte Agent for email.
Or it's one of those things. What do you do? And maybe that is the right approach. Don't use something common. Well, the rest of us have to use Outlook because that's what our employer said. You have to use Outlook. So I have to turn off preview, or I have to do certain things, or you have to restrict RTF files as they're entering the network. There's now a whole different set of challenges that we have available to us. So there's not a lot of places, back to your question, there's not a lot of places you can go to get a truly independent test of antivirus. One very common one, and it's as independent, I guess, as you can get, is AV comparatives. That's a very good example of independent testing. This is it's almost a entirely different set of a business that was built to be independent, They require the antivirus companies pay them to participate. I'm guessing. I'm sure that must be the case. And then the antivirus companies send them their software and they independently run the software. So it's a company that was created, a business created for the need to do independent testing that was here because people needed to have this. And they do have reports that you can look at and see what are the heuristic tests, what are the real world file detection tests, what are they like? And they perform these tests like once a year, twice a year, and you can see updates. The latest file detection test was done in September 13. Let's load this up, this PDF. Here's I didn't even have to put in my name and password or give them private information. The file detection test of malicious software, including a false alarm test, September 13th. It was revised in October. We can scroll down and we start to get a breakdown. Who was tested? OnLab, Avast, AVG, Bitdefender, F-Secure, McAfee, Microsoft Symantec, et cetera. Gives the breakdown of the pieces, and it tells you who missed samples. Lower is better. Avira at the bottom and Symantec at the other end. Symantec did awful on this particular test. But the problem that you run into is that Symantec might have done badly on this test, but if you look at another test they did, Symantec did exceptionally well until 6 months from now, when suddenly it's reversed or different. It's hard to keep up with this. The larger companies...
It's a moving target.
It's absolutely a moving target. The larger companies tend to have more resources they can put towards this. And antivirus as a business is a very difficult business. I don't yearn for the days when I was working for an antivirus company because they don't like to hear this, but it's very commoditized. There are so many competitors. The competition is pushing the costs lower and lower. Lower costs mean there's fewer resources to catch these viruses on the other end. And so you now have in my opinion, you now have an entire group of antivirus software that is much more anemic than it's ever been because we've now just spread the problem out.
I've also seen cases where some of the software is also agenda-based, in other words. There's this particular company, I won't name it, but I've seen it flag one of my programs as a virus and delete it without me being able to make a decision on it, simply because that particular program does things that in competition with the software company that makes the virus software. So you get a lot of that, I think.
Sometimes these tests that people have to participate in drive how the product operates. Unfortunately, there have been cases where companies have presented their technology to these testing centers, and because the default configuration is not to delete the file like you found, it scored lower on the test. If they had just changed the default setting of their software to delete the file, they would have scored higher. Oh, we're going to change the default setting so it's higher, but by the time it gets to you, however, now it's a problem because it fired on a false positive, deleted your file, but they scored better. So there's that. It's a horrible mess at times. You kind of have to take it for what it is.
Okay. I'd love to be able to do something like build a list of core Windows files and be able to put them together and run a hash and compare hashes every week to see if something's changed as a possible indicator of a problem. An absolutely valid way to be able to do.
Valid way to do that. In the Linux world, that happens all the time with software that's run on server devices where that software's job, that daemon on the Linux device, is only job is to look at these key pieces, these key files on the operating system, and to flag if any of those things ever change, or to prevent anything from ever touching them, or to prevent other things other than what you know to be safe from making a change to those. It's an important layer, but of course that doesn't stop everything. If you look to see what a malware does, it touches everything on a machine. It goes into the registry. It changes files that are in the system folder. It changes other files that may be located somewhere else. It changes the ones that have been backed up with the system restore. So in case you want to restore, it's going to infect that as well. So the answer, which is the best antivirus? There is no best antivirus. I tend to use Microsoft's antivirus, their Windows, now Windows Defender does everything in Windows 8. I tend to use that. It sits generally in the middle of the pack. In fact, the September 2013 false positives on AV comparatives, Microsoft is the best. They sell 0 false positives from this list. So, other months, they score horribly. It goes back and forth with these things. It's hard to tell sometimes. So I tend to go with the big names. I think you can't go wrong if you go with a big name. I say can't go wrong. That's a relative term as well. But I don't go with somebody who's very, very small. But the big names that are out there in AV tend to have more resources available. That doesn't always mean it's the best, but at least they've got more going for them. It used to be called Microsoft Security Essentials. Now it's all rolled up in the Microsoft bigger.
Yeah, I think
antivirus.
I usually have a couple of free ones. There's only one that I do for dynamic real time so that it doesn't conflict with anything else. And then there may be other things like Malwarebytes that I'll run on an as needed basis just to do general scanning. But there's just one that I do for like online catching and things and stuff like that.
Malwarebytes, pretty strong piece of software. It's most people use it as you use it, which is on demand. You think you might be infected or you'd like a sanity check of your machine. It's an absolutely free license for personal use to be able to run on demand scans, and it's extremely useful, very good piece of software. It should be in your arsenal if you do a lot of malware cleaning. It's absolutely in your list of things. There is a premium version that if you're an organization, you're not using this for personal use, or you want it to be real-time scanning, Malwarebytes will also do that. I've worked with organizations in their security department that ran multiple antivirus software on their machine simultaneously. And so many people tell me, you can't do that. You can't run multiple antivirus. They'll fight with each other. I don't know what you're talking about. It's very common for security professionals to do that if they're in charge of desktop workstations. I'm sure there probably are some incompatibilities with some software doing certain things with other pieces of software, but it's incredibly common, especially large environments, to run Malwarebytes, Premium, Microsoft, and Symantec all at the same time on the same system. It's not what you would generally do on someone's end computer. It's not something you deploy to everybody, but if you're in the security department, that's a great way to do your testing of these pieces of software all at the same time, and it works fantastic. In the chat room, people are saying, yeah, I use AVG, I use ESET. There's people that use them and have those types of stories as well. I wish I could tell you this one is the best by far, but unfortunately in this particular industry, for antivirus anyway, there is no such thing.
No, I understand, and I'll make some valid judgments on that. Anyway, I appreciate your time as always. One favor: when you go at the beginning of these sessions and you put up the thing that says "How long have you been studying?"
Yes,
I'd like you to add a column in the next thing, one that says "I'm already certified, but I'm here taking it for CEs."
This is a great idea.
I don't know. I'm not really studying for it anymore, but I'm studying to do my continuing education, sort of thing.
I will add it. It's in my Evernote right now. I've already synced it to the cloud, so I'll add that in the next study group. That's a good request. Thank you for that suggestion.
Okay. Thanks again. By the way, I will be in your area, in the Tallahassee area, in early May on one of my diving trips. If you're there, maybe we go out for coffee.
Oh, that sounds fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. Send me a message, tweet me, do a contact us at the top of the page, and we'll absolutely make some time for that.
Okay. Thanks much. Take care now.
Thanks for calling. Appreciate everything.
Bye now.
Bye-bye. There is...
Take care. Bye.
There's a lot with antivirus. Boy, I could talk, literally for days on the antivirus side, just because of everything that I've done in the past and the current with malware and antivirus and where the industry's going and what we're doing. And there's so much involved with that piece. There's another call that came in. I'm going to flip real quick back to 661 since you've been holding and we heard nothing from you before you. There's 661. There's just silence there. Nothing.
Hello.
I hear hello.
Hello.
I think you would be best to get a headphone, and because I can hear the chat room kind of making its awful noise under the surface. There's a way to turn off those noises in the chat room, by the way. It's in the little cog wheel under the list of all of the people that are in the chat on the far right side. It has the number of students online. There's a little cog at the top. You can turn off that noise. Maybe it's just me. Maybe it only bothers me and drives me crazy, and everybody else is fine. I should probably check to see if there's just some master switch I can make so that never happens. But we do have a call in from the 517 area code. Are you there, 517?
Hello?
Hello. What's your name?
Andrew.
Hello, Andrew. What can we do for you today? Thanks for calling.
I've got two questions for you. One, I am really having difficulty with things like distance vectoring and things like that. So if you could maybe talk about that a little bit.
Okay. Let's start with that one. In fact, I'll pull up some information I have on the distance vector side. This is really more of a nomenclature type of issue. It's something you have to know. We don't usually say in common speak when you're talking to network professionals, so what distance vector algorithm are you using today? It's more of what routing protocol are you using? And you sort of have to think about when you're designing your network, what's distant, which one are we going to use and why are we going to use it that way? There is, in fact, I have the details on this. I'll pull up for distance vector routing protocols. When you're designing a network, you're connecting all these routers together, you have to decide the best route things are going to take. We did this earlier. Did you see the part of the study group where we talked about routing tables?
Unfortunately, I was a little late to the study group, so I missed pretty much everything.
No problem. You can watch the replay, and during the very beginning of this, we talked about routing tables, and we did not talk about distance vector or other methodologies around deciding how to do this, but we did talk about how routers have to know how to get from point A to point B. And we talked very generalized about routing protocols and how they operate. There are a number of different ways for routers to make the determination of how to get to the next route. One of the ways we did it earlier, we talked about static routing, where you as the administrator, you go into the router and you tell the router manually, here's how you get to this next network. But in many large networks, they are very big, so manually setting routes is a bit of a challenge. What if you add another route? You have to go to all of your other routers and manually add a route into all of those. That's kind of a pain. That's why we have dynamic routing. And the dynamic routing protocols are great because you can tell your router, use OSPF. Everybody, you all talk OSPF, all of you routers. And the routers go, okay, well, let's figure out who's out there. And the OSPF routers talk to the other OSPF routers, and they all figure out themselves without you touching them how to get traffic through the network. It's almost like magic. And when it works well, it really is like magic. It's fantastic. Certain dynamic routing protocols use different methods to be able to figure out what is the best route. Because that's really the question. It's what's the best route? Is it the route that takes the fewest number of hops, the fewest number of links to get from point A to point B? Is it the route that has the fastest time or the most amount of bandwidth available on those links? Is it the route that has a combination of delay and bandwidth combined together to determine the best route? And that's where you get into these conversations about things like distance vector. The vector, you're trying to determine what is the best way to get between point A and point B. So I've pulled up my slides here that I use on my link state and distance vector and hybrid routing presentation. And if you're trying to figure out the best way, if it's a distance vector protocol and it's trying to figure out the best way to get to the other side, what's the best vector to get me from this side of the network to the other? It's distance. And in the world of networking, distance is number of hops. So if you're looking at a protocol that's designed to figure out the best distance, like RIP or RIP version 2 or BGP, those say, how many hops does it take to get there? I'm going to take the one that has fewer hops to get to that route. Unless that disappears, and I'll take another one with fewer hops. That's a distance vector protocol. And that's one that you very commonly see used. RIP version 2 is a very common version of that. BGP, very common. So it's not really looking at bandwidth. The real challenge you get into is if a connection has a really slow bandwidth. What if you have to go over a really slow satellite connection, but if there's another way to that remote site that's one more hop, but it goes through all on the planet Earth, and it's much faster bandwidth wise. That's really the better connection. This type of distance vectoring may not be the way to route for you. Maybe it's something like a link state, where it is looking at the links and trying to determine the best way to get there. Maybe it's using bandwidth. Maybe it's using a weighting that you apply to it that might be based on bandwidth or might not. Or when you get into something like EIGRP, we've always said this is sort of a hybrid routing. It's not exactly the best case of hybrid routing. We sort of call it that because it's doing, by default, bandwidth and delay, but you can add other things to it. You may see it referred to hybrid. You may also see it referred to as a link state, and that's probably more appropriate to call it something like link state. But at the end of the day, all of these things are combined together to create that routing table that we talked about earlier, and that really is the best way to go about and try to figure out how to build the routing table inside of your router. Does that make some sense, Andrew?
Yes.
You said you had 2 questions. Does it revolve around the same thing?
Well, I appreciate you explaining that a lot better. Yes, I do have another question.
Hit me.
I've been watching your after shows, and there was a big question where a lot of people are asking, and I'm going to be the guy and put another nick in your shoulder, but at some point in the year, maybe you could debut the Security Plus study group.
Yes, and it's one that comes up often. I think it's good that you mention it because this is an ongoing debate. I mentioned earlier in the study group that I sit down and I have meetings with the vice president of the company, which is Mrs. Professor Messer, and we determine what our next steps are going to be. What are we going to do in the next month? What are we going to do in the next 3 months, the next 6 months, the next year, and beyond? What do we want to be able to do with this? I want to do a live Security Plus study group. I want to do a lot more live events. I want to come into my office in the morning, turn on the stream, just let it go all day. Why not? That's my idea of where I'm trying to get to, and not just turn it on and you see me, drinking coffee and browsing Reddit. I'm thinking that we might actually have more content that would be live that we would be able to do, or you can just look in as I'm recording more videos, or it becomes part of the video recording process. I really do have, I say this every time, I really do have plans to increase the amount of live events that we are doing, and I would expect Security Plus would be an obvious first choice for another live event to do. I also would like to do a live technology call-in show, maybe something at night where we just talk about technology news. It doesn't have to be about certifications. In fact, no certification talk. Let's talk about the news of the day. That Facebook bought Oculus. Is it awful? Is it not? I have my own opinions. I've got a call-in line. Why not take advantage of that? And I'm doing things in the short term that hopefully will allow me to do a lot more live events in the long term. And I know that means nothing. I just said nonsense. But trust me, we are actively working on this. I really want to be able to do these things. I don't know if it's going to happen in a month. I don't know if it's going to happen in 6 months or even longer, but I want to be able to do these things. Trust me. And I think it'd be great fun too. And that I think a lot of people will be able to take advantage of that and use those types of information as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you just to make it a little more consistent, because about every month someone asks you, so I just wanted to be that guy. I
should just have a sign put up on the screen. Let me go to that slide and say that. But if people don't ask, I won't know what you want. So it's incredibly important. If you see, I would really like to have this course. I would really like to have videos on these topics. I would really like to have live events on this thing. Tell me, send me a tweet, put it on my Facebook page, put it on my Google Plus page, hit contact us link at the top, call into the study group. I don't care how you do it. Tell me, because I make these decisions. It's me and Mrs. Professor Messer. We're the ones making the decision of where to go next. If I don't know, then it doesn't become part of the equation. So incredibly important that you're able to do that. And I thank you for the recommendation.
You're very welcome. Thank you for taking my call.
Thanks for calling in, and best of luck with those studies. And it sounds like you'll be getting to those that certification very, very shortly. Okay, we've got nobody in. I said other people in the chat room said the phone number won't let you call in. And I don't know why it would not. You've got 2 phone lines you can call in for this. If you were wanting to call in, we have another 10 minutes available on this. I get 2 hours a day. I want to increase that too. I just want to have open phone lines all the time. But 2 hours a day, we can call in. I've got 10 minutes left. You can always call in with 347-989-8745 or toll free via Skype at 855-235-4742. You know, we've had the 661 area code that's tried so hard to get through, and there's another 661 coming in. Are you there, caller?
Yes, I am.
Yes, you are. You're the one been trying to call in this whole time?
No, it's not.
Oh.
I don't know who that is.
I don't know who that is either. What's your name?
Anthony.
I thought it was. I recognized the voice. I've already typed in. I have a little thing here where I put everybody's name. Your name was already in there before I even asked. I wanted to make sure. What can we do for you today, Anthony?
I'm calling in because I want to know if you have a diagram or a video that you've done already where I can look to see how to set up, like if I was setting up in a business a voice over IP with the modem and all the other gadgets that go with it, to be able to learn and study that.
That would be good. That is a whole science unto itself. In fact, I think I'm going to just grab one manufacturer's particular certification line. Obviously, one of the most significant, certainly one of the widest, broadest voice over IP implementations that you will find out there is from Cisco. They've done an excellent job of taking their routing and switching line and moving into voice over IP. It's remarkable how many offices I walk into and it's got a Cisco voice over IP phone sitting right there. They have certifications that are focusing on voice. The CCNP voice is a good example of that, where you get your CCNT, you get your CCNA, and the next step is a CCNP, and they have an actual one for voice. And they do that because there's so many different components surrounding voice over IP. There's so many different the protocols that voice over IP uses are incredibly complex with the call setup, the H323 or the SIP. There is the protocols that are used for real-time transport, the RTP, and a lot of complexity goes into the administration and the design of networks because it almost always requires some type of quality of service that allows the voice over IP perhaps to have enough bandwidth and priority to be real-time communication, and then me browsing Reddit would have a lower priority, for instance. So it's not just any one thing. I probably wouldn't create a single video on this. It would be an entire series to be able to do something like that. One of the other places you could go for resources, and I haven't checked lately, but I'm wondering if they still have good resources out here, is the asterisk technology. Well, not on that webpage, not on asterisk.org today. You're not going to see the asterisk voice over IP free products because that's what their webpage looks like. I know you can't see this on the stream yet, but if you go to asterisk.org or you search for asterisk, you're not going to find their webpage. At least I was not able to. But on the Wikipedia page for asterisk, you can find more information. They used to have, or perhaps still do in there somewhere, some great resources that talk about setting up an asterisk server, because you can download it, run it today on your computer, and even use a soft phone, which is a software that you would run on your desktop, and use that soft phone through an asterisk PDF or asterisk server, maybe in a virtual server, and go to that call manager and then dial out to other things. That may be a good place to find that. And if you go to the Wikipedia page, they talk about session initiation protocol, the media gateway control protocol, H323. It can operate between that and PSTNs. There's also an inter-asterisk exchange protocol, IAX2, which allows them to trunk multiple asterisk servers together. Already this is getting complex.
Yeah.
It's not even a single server, but because it's so detailed and complex, once you know it, you got it. And there's a big call for this type of technology and people who know this technology out in the IT world, because it's so hard to figure out. You can't just jump into it and know what to do. If you have knowledge of asterisk, knowledge of Cisco, knowledge of the other voice over IP technologies that are out there, your particular skills are in high demand, and you may find there's some real opportunity there just by knowing these types of technologies. I don't have any current plans to do a voice over IP series, but I do have plans to do more general technology videos that would apply towards a broader scope. And it may be that, well, certainly voice over IP applies to that. It's such an integral part of people's networks these days. I think it would be really interesting to do a voice over IP course. I just don't know if the demand for that would work so well for my particular site. But these are the types of things I'm constantly evaluating and trying to figure out what makes sense. What I think sometimes is completely wrong, and I get redirected to do things I really should be doing. Nature of the beast.
I understand. That'll work.
Well, good luck with that. Any other questions?
No, that'll do it.
Anthony, thanks for calling in. Good to talk to you. And let us know how it goes.
Okay, you have a good weekend.
Take care. Very quickly, we've got a few others. There's 3 minutes and 36 seconds left on the stream. We're going to quickly go to the person who's been holding the longest, which is the 559 area code. Are you there, caller? It's silent.
Hello.
Oh, hello, 559. Are you there?
Hello.
Hello, I think.
Can you hear me?
I can sort of hear you. You're a little muffled. Maybe you can get a question out and we'll be able to answer it with the time left.
I have a question from the last week itself.
Okay.
It's regarding ReadyBoost. You were discussing about the ReadyBoost, right?
Yes.
Well, mine is a Lenovo PC, and I use a 8 GB RAM. So if I use a 4 GB USB drive, will it be worth it doing a ReadyBoost or not?
And this is one of the things that we talked about on our A+ study group last, or it was earlier in the month. It may have even been this month for Marches with ReadyBoost. As I mentioned in that study group, you never know if it's really going to work well for you. I've had mixed performance with ReadyBoost. This is a technology in Windows where you can plug in a USB drive and get faster performance of your operating system because it's writing cached information to the USB drive rather than writing it to what's most of the time is a slower physical spinning hard drive. I've had mixed success. So if you are planning to do ReadyBoost, I think the best way to tell would be to watch your Windows operating system and especially your resource manager, plug in the ReadyBoost and have it running and see how your CPU really reacts to this. I've had situations where ReadyBoost improved the performance. I've had other situations where ReadyBoost did not improve. It actually made the system slower. And I think a lot of that revolves around your USB subsystem, the type of drive you're using, the speed of your hard drive, and a lot of other pieces in there. So it's
90 seconds.
I understand. Thank you. And it's one of those things that you run into and you never know exactly how it's going to go. The last call of the day, 440. Are you there, caller?
Hey, Professor. It's Kevin Mulder.
Hello, Kevin. What can we do for you?
Well, I started at a MSP company about 5 weeks ago.
Okay.
And I came into the company, and they have no documentation. They've been
Great.
in business since 92.
Fabulous.
60
I
seconds.
know. So it's been a challenge for me to integrate with this new company. And I've been kind of tasked with the role of putting documentation together.
Good. This is okay. Great. Okay.
So my question is, as it's not on the Network Plus exam, but more the network part of a business, what's the best route, easiest for putting together such documentation?
You're actually in a pretty good position to be able to do something like this because it's not uncommon for organizations to have a lack of documentation. When you're putting together these big projects, you're putting together a database project, a voice over IP project, a new routing infrastructure, all these pieces, you generally run into situations. I know the nice lady is going to tell me that the stream is going to close, but we'll still be up and running, and I think you'll still be able to hear me. If not, I'll certainly answer offline because that's it. Stream is done, but you're still here, right, Kevin?
Yes.
Okay. So the it's actually a great opportunity if you're brand new to the organization. The organization's going to have a chance to document things they just didn't have time to do before. And while you're documenting it, you're going to find that you now understand, in some cases, probably better than the people who are already there who put it together, because you'll be the one person who knows this device connects to this device. It uses these protocols for this application. It's not a simple thing to put those types of things together. If you, in the industry, probably the best documentation piece of software that you'll tend to run into is Visio, a Microsoft application that is able to do spreadsheets, charts, but it is used almost exclusively in the networking field to build out physical pictures of what a rack is configured as, and logical pictures of the network diagrams and what's connecting to different places. If you're doing any documentation, you really need to understand how to use Visio, and at least to build the charts and the things you're looking at. And there's a lot of examples out on the internet of people who have done this. There are also, if you're not using Windows, then Visio isn't an option for you. In Mac OS X, I use a similar, although I think better product. I just upgraded it. Where's my copy of it? I was going to bring it up for you to see as well. Where is let me make sure I get all of the naming right on it. My problem is that I have too many applications on my screen to be able to find anything I need with the piece that's there. There it is. It's OmniGraffle, and I wanted to make sure I got the website correct. OmniGraffle about, and it is at omnigroup.com. I knew it wasn't omnigraffle.com. They might have a redirect, but OmniGroup is the one that does that for Mac OS X. But a similar thing where there's a server. Let me put a server on the screen. In fact, if you look at my Network Plus course and you see a chart in there where I've got a lot of devices on the screen and a little dot moving back and forth, I created the picture of the network in OmniGraffle or Visio, and then I used the animation within the slideware to create the little packet that goes back and forth. So that's what I build everything in for mine, and it's a great way to document for you. Most people will have different kinds of documentation. They'll have a physical infrastructure document, because you need to know that this server connects to this port on the patch panel, which then connects to this port on a switch. But that doesn't tell you the logical layout of what VLAN that device is in, and are there multiple virtual servers on that physical device. You need to build out 3 separate servers now, because there's 3 virtual devices, 3 virtual servers inside of that same physical device. So you generally will have 2 different sets of documentation, one that's physical, which may or may not be as important as the one that's logical. If you're trying to troubleshoot the way an app works, I need the logical layout. If you're trying to troubleshoot why you lost the 3rd floor network, then you want the physical layout. So they both will apply, just in different ways.
Right, and that's what seems to kind of be the general consensus, is that Visio is great for network physical layout diagrams, but there's so much to network documentation that I'm not really sure which template to kind of choose. I went with a basic template just to start for the clients.
Right.
That kind of said, okay, this is their domain, this is who you contact, this is their vendor support numbers, here's the credentials to log in, here's the printers, here's the workstation server names, kind of basically like a 1-page, if I'm on site and I can't access the internet, here's all the information I need to access any computer, server, hardware, appliance in the network. I have it. But as far as going deeper into network documentation, as far as the company and acceptable use policies and security procedures, and where do I really stop with documenting a client? That's kind of, because there's basic to just, like I said, the 1 page that this is everything you need to access any device, server, because you have the login, the IP address, the host name, the services it provides, but then you also have the physical layout and whatnot from Visio, but then you also have policies and procedures and where do I stop? You know,
it's scope creep comes very quickly. Someone says, I need you to document the network. And then you could spend your entire life documenting everything you would ever need to know. What operating system is on that device? What service pack has been configured on that device? How many interface cards? What type of interface cards? What chipset is on those interface cards? What year of that chipset is on the interface cards? You could spend forever going down that road. You almost need to start before you even start the process, or now would be a good time to do it. Say, what do you want to do with this documentation? Is this only for us internally in this department, or do we hand this off to the help desk so they can solve problems or call the right people? Is this being used by our project management team to make a determination on when they can organize everyone to do maintenance on a particular application? You have to have that list of things. If you don't, there's no end to the amount of documentation you could create. And I think in most environments that I run into, the network team has a network physical documentation and some logical documentation for their VLANs. And that's it. They rarely put on their diagrams what servers are where and what their names are and IP addresses. That's a server team. The server team obviously has another completely separate set of documentation that effectively tells them where all the servers are and how they're configured and another group of things. It's very difficult to find. It's very unusual to find someone who is combining all the things together that you just mentioned. The fact that you have one piece of documentation that even has what you're talking about is remarkable. In government organizations, you do tend to see, especially military and national federal type government, you do see a lot more detailed documentation because they put an extra effort into providing that, and there's so many people involved. But in smaller organizations, smaller enterprises, you never get that level of detail with the network piece. It's actually very nice to have, but you need to figure out the scope now and then build your documentation to that scope, or you'll be there forever.
Right. Yeah, I know that's kind of been the issue, is that, you know, back when I was viewing your lessons months ago, I was working at another company. The one that we'd actually talked about where I had a network cable that couldn't figure out where it went in the physical location, and we were trying to troubleshoot that.
Right.
And you said, call back when you figure out where it was. I'd like to hear the end of the story.
Yes.
Well, I never actually figured out. I unplugged it. Nobody complained. And I just, it must be a printer or a phone or something. I have no idea.
Who knows?
But I work for a new company that does
We're never going to know.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I pretty much came in after that company, and I pretty much am restructuring their organization because they are using a similar product, the same product, ConnectWise, to manage their tickets. And I pretty much am showing them how to utilize it based on my previous job. And I'm telling them you need documentation. And, I'm kind of just baffling them. It's a team of 8 technicians. We're all technically called network engineers. There's no server team. There's
Excellent.
no infrastructure team.
Great.
There's no basic help desk.
Awesome.
It's that's why I'm kind of like, okay, I need some guidance here,
Yeah.
pretty much, to how to rebuild their company. And, I just, you're the best resource I got.
This is why you see organizations that have a separate help desk and a separate network team and a separate server team. And although there are complications that can sometimes be created, I worked in a third-party call center where we outsourced people's calls. So when you called DirecTV, you were really calling our call center. When you called Sprint, you were really calling our call center. We just had an enormous call center, and we were contracted. And we had a separate network team and a separate server team and a separate help desk. And we got along great. It was an environment where we would all hang out together. We would make sure we knew everything that was going on. It was a very jovial, fun to work in environment where there wasn't a lot of silos where people were, no, you can't see help desk things. No, you can't see network stuff. We're like, yeah, come on in. Here's how it connects. We get in a room together. We'd figure out how to do it, and we do it. Those are the best types of situations. And it sounds like it could be something that that your organization can figure out as well. You folks are going to focus on answering phones. You're going to focus on the network piece. You'll handle the server piece. We just all need to make sure we keep the lines of communication open, because that's how it ends up with most organizations, because it ultimately has to. There has to be someone users can call. They just can't call whoever is on duty, or call Fred, because Fred always answers their problems, but don't call George, because George will never help you with that piece. That becomes
kind of how
complicated.
It has been.
Yep.
Is that the customers were trained to just call whoever's available, and somebody will answer the phone. And I've been trying to structure it and restructure it to say, look, we have a system here. You email your tickets in, it creates a ticket.
Right.
Somebody will get back with you, and you don't just call and get a hold of a technician. And if somebody's on the phone, you don't say, hey, are you available? Kevin, we have this user that has this problem. No, I'm in the middle of 5 other things.
Right.
So you have to schedule the ticket, and someone will get back to them. It's processes, procedures, policies. They just don't adhere to it. I'm surprised that they're still in business.
And it's remarkable, really, how far you can go outside the scope of being organized, and still everything seems to work. The network's up and running. It's kind of chaotic behind the scenes because there's no structure, but it works. I think these things tend to take care of themselves, though. There will be a point when the organization gets big enough, or needs to get bigger, where they can't, because you're spending all of your time randomly trying to take care of everyone's problems, that these things eventually require, okay, we need a help desk now. There needs to be structure. How can we put a ticketing process in place that's easy for our people who need to call, and they don't think it's another barrier to getting things resolved? And then we have a process behind the scenes that continues to get these problems resolved quickly. It's not an easy answer. There are no shortcuts with that one, but ultimately the company either doesn't grow, it fails, or it has to get bigger, and somebody has to make a business decision around that, because there's money and resources involved. And whenever there's money involved, there's always a challenge. It doesn't matter.
Right.
It's the nature of the beast.
I asked that. As a new employee coming into the business, I was interviewed, and one of the typical interview questions is, what's your 2-year plan? What's your 5-year plan? Where do you see yourself in 5 years, for this company? Well, I never asked the same question in return, thinking that, because they're interviewing me as a potential employee, but I'm also interviewing them as a potential employer.
So true.
Do I fit within this company? And the question that I wanted to ask was, where's your business 5-year plan? How do you plan to handle, you say you're growing 48 to 52% per year. So how do you handle customer expansion? How are you compartmentalizing your departments? Do you have a server team? Do you have levels of support? How are you handling that? And basically when I asked this question, the HR woman, who is the wife of the owner of the company, she just left for the day. I'm like, okay, well, I guess answer my question.
There you go. That's the answer. We haven't thought about that yet. That's
right. And that's something that's important, because like you said, when they grow, they're going to need a help desk team. They're going to need to restructure. And that's something that I'm trying to help with. And I just don't know about restructuring a company to the point where it's effective and can handle that growth.
It's one of these things.
The documentation.
The help desk software that most people use, it tends to make those things obvious for everyone, because you kind of start with the help desk. Get somebody centralizing these tickets so that you can just organize them better, assign them off, and then everything kind of grows from there. There's no single perfect way to do it in anybody's environment. You've got, one of the nice things is now, next time you do an interview, you've got some other things you can ask about these pieces and things to look out for. But I think a lot of people see these kind of environments as it's chaotic, it's not organized enough. This is a waste of my time, or I'm frustrated by this. But I actually find those environments to be the ones where I learn the most. This is a great opportunity for whoever's there. Already, there's groups that understand networking, servers, now help desk software, organizations and their changes. Now you have to do an entire business process management structure of how do we do change control? At what time of the day can we do change control? I bet you in your environment that people are making changes to registry entries on a server at 2:00 in the afternoon. I guarantee it, because there's nothing in place to prevent it. Did the server go down? No. Okay, we're good. Did you do testing? Was there regression testing done? Is there a rollback? should this, oh, well, I don't know. He left for the day and he's the one who did it. I don't know what we'd roll back to. I'm sure it's fine. We'll be okay. That is a much broader and a much more difficult set of conversations to have. And it also requires somebody who's kind of been through that before, because you have to have the structure in place and the backing by management to be able to say, nobody can touch these servers until 2:00 in the morning on a Sunday. And that means that everybody has to change what they've been doing. Now everybody has to get up late or early in the morning on a Sunday to make this change. There has to be a lot more testing done before the change is deployed. The people making the change are now probably going to be different than the ones that created the change. That's a big change. That's a lot of things that are happening there. And it's not simple for it to occur. Better that it happen when you're small than when you're large, though. So there may be some real opportunities here just by building out a help desk that will help organize the process. Maybe that's the best place to start.
Yeah, and we try. We bring in help desk technicians. And like I said, this is my 5th week, but from the information I've gathered, they bring in help desks that are supposed to be there on site and never leaving the office. And then 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, they're sending them on site because they're, someone's on vacation or there's a issue, and their service level agreements are mandated that customers get a certain amount of time per week on site, which shortens help desk, because somebody has to be on site. And, I think that, what happened was they got scared because they lost a customer due to not being on site enough.
Right.
And so they got freaked out, and they added in the SLA for the customers that they will get a certain amount of on-site time guaranteed, which then puts the whole company at risk with other clients to, shorten the amount of time. And I was on site yesterday for about 6 hours, and I was, hey, where are you? Why are you still there? And I said, what do you mean? I'm fixing tickets, issues, I can't just leave the customer with half their tickets resolved.
Right.
And they said, well, they only get 4 hours a week. So, that whole kind of, like you said, help desk development tried and failed.
Yeah, but there is there's an opportunity there by the business side, because if you are changing your SLAs to require more on-site time, the person who made that change knows it's going to cost more money. It's obvious, but the idea from their perspective is if I can invest more time with that customer, I can retain them and not lose more business to somebody else. The real problem, though, is when companies aren't willing to make the proper investments. So part of the help desk and part of the things that happen is that the management knows, here's what happened. We weren't able to take care of things internally because we were at this remote site. Just to let you know, you might want to hire somebody else. You might want to get somebody else in here to do more on-site with this customer, or put the money in a different place. That, unfortunately, is sort of outside the scope of IT. It's really more of a business decision. And now with smaller organizations, this is where they either thrive or where they tend to stumble. And it's now up to the person making the ultimate decisions to be able to make the decision of where the resources are going. And sometimes they make the right decisions. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they don't know, so they guess, and then they figure it out later on down the line. But ultimately, those problems also tend to take care of themselves as well, unfortunately, or sometimes for the betterment.
Right. Good. Well, that answers my questions about network documentation.
I wish you luck. By the way, for folks who are always thinking that networking is this incredibly complex environment where we're all standing around in white coats and determining the next course of action for troubleshooting, sometimes just unplug the wire that's in the wall and you see if anybody calls. That's how it works. Nature of the beast. Thanks for calling, Kevin, and let us know how it goes with the saga of the organization.
I will, for sure. Thank you, Professor.
Absolutely. Take care. There's a whole world of consultants that all they do is wander the globe, quite literally, wander the globe, go from place to place, and put together policies for their business processes, business process management, BPM. And all they do is walk in the door, they examine what's currently in place, and they make recommendations and implement processes to take the development piece, keep it away from production, change control processes, development processes, QA and testing, network infrastructure processes. That is how it goes. Well, for those of you that have been kind of following along, I get 2 hours a day of these calls, so I can't get any more folks to call in, unfortunately. And at the end of the day, we've gone for 2.25 hours, 2 hours and 20 minutes. So I think my throat is actually at the point where I can't talk much more with this anyway. So this may be the perfect time to bring this particular edition of the study group to a close. But I appreciate you hanging on for the study group and hanging on for after the study group is over. The after show, sometimes a more interesting and diverse set of questions that we get during the normal study group. And I got so many more questions that I just wasn't able to go through that we'll put in the hopper for next time. I'm going to have to do more of these every week, it seems, to be able to keep up with the number of questions coming in. So I really do appreciate your support. I noticed a few of you took advantage of the study guides and grabbing those. That goes, again, directly to keeping the site going. Thanks for doing that as well. And for those of you that are wanting to send in that continuing education, that secret code of traceroute was what I was looking for. You can always send that in. I'll send you the CEs for that original piece. We'll get that going as well. And please send me your questions. Always. We'll do this again next month on the next study group. Thanks for joining us, everyone. We'll see you then.